Welcome to HD Rare Coins, your ultimate source for rare coins, fascinating history, and the thrill of discovery. From legendary pennies to hidden gems, we explore the world of numismatics one amazing coin at a time. In the mid-1980s, the United States was experiencing a unique moment in time. The Cold War was still simmering, pop culture was exploding with new sounds and styles, and technology was just beginning to reshape everyday life. Amidst all this change, something quietly continued in the background, something many Americans never gave a second thought to: the steady production of the humble Lincoln cent. The year was 1985, and as millions of pennies rolled off presses at the U.S. Mint, no one could have predicted that one among them would someday be worth more than a luxury car. Understand how a 1985 1-cent coin became one of the most sought-after pieces in American numismatics. We have to start with the coin itself. At first glance, it appears ordinary. On the obverse, the familiar profile of President Abraham Lincoln, stoic, time-honored, instantly recognizable. His image had been there since 1909, a tribute to the centennial of his birth. The reverse, since 1959, displayed the Lincoln Memorial in sharp architectural detail, commemorating 150 years since Lincoln's birth and representing a modernized vision of the penny. But 1985 was a transitional year in many subtle ways. It was the third full year after the U.S. Mint shifted from the traditional bronze alloy to the more cost-effective copper-plated zinc composition, introduced in mid-1982. The new composition changed not just the physical makeup of the penny, but also how it aged, how it reacted to striking, and how it wore down over time. The Mint was also modernizing its machinery, improving die production, and phasing out aging equipment, leading to small inconsistencies and, sometimes, unexpected anomalies. And then came the discovery. At first, it was a quiet murmur in the collector community. A few sharp-eyed hobbyists noticed something strange about certain 1985 cents. These coins, while seemingly typical at first glance, had striking differences upon closer inspection. One showed dramatically doubled letters in Liberty. Another had a misaligned die strike, creating a warped but fully legible profile. Then came the big one, a coin featuring a clear, sharp strike of Lincoln's bust on a planchet that didn't belong to a 1-cent coin at all. This particular 1985 Lincoln cent had been struck on a foreign planchet, a leftover blank from another country's coinage that somehow made its way into the minting process. Because the U.S. Mint produced coins for multiple countries at various times, the presence of a foreign planchet wasn't impossible. But to find it paired with a domestic die, that was the lightning strike. It wasn't just rare, it was nearly impossible. The result was a slightly lighter, thinner coin with a slightly different tone, and yet, the details were flawless. It was a genuine strike, not a counterfeit. Not altered. Not manipulated. Just an extraordinary mistake. Collectors were stunned. The rarity, the precision, the mystery, it all came together in one piece. That coin was eventually authenticated and graded by a top-tier certification service, receiving not only a near-perfect technical grade but also a special designation noting its striking error. From there, its legend only grew. Soon, the 1985 penny became more than a year to check, it became a phenomenon. Collectors began scouring their old rolls, pulling out every 1985 cent they could find. Some found minor errors, die chips, plating bubbles, weak strikes. Others discovered off-center strikes and slight double dies. But nothing matched the sheer rarity and excitement of that foreign planchet example. It was one of a kind, or, at least, so far no others have surfaced. And as all collectors know, rarity is the beating heart of value. The market responded swiftly. At private auction, the coin drew fierce competition. Collectors, dealers, and even museum representatives expressed interest. The bidding war was intense, filled with strategy and surprise jumps. When the hammer finally fell, the coin had sold for an eye-watering $145,000. The new owner, a well-known private collector, called it a cornerstone of his collection, something that would never be sold again. The ripple effects were immediate. Coin shows added special segments on the 1985 cent YouTube channels and blogs dove into the story, encouraging everyday people to look through their change. Even mainstream media picked up the tale, broadcasting stories of pennies worth a fortune and fueling a new wave of amateur collectors. Suddenly, 1985 wasn't just another date, it was a year of excitement, of possibility, of treasure hiding in plain sight, and that's the beauty of this story. The 1985 Lincoln penny didn't become valuable because of gold, or silver, or gemstones, it became valuable because of a perfect storm of history, human error, and sharp-eyed observation. It reminds us that even the smallest things, a coin you pass over every day, can hold unimaginable worth. So now, when you hold a penny in your hand, especially one from 1985, you may just look at it a little differently. It might just be ordinary. But what if it's not? What if you're holding the next big discovery? What if your change jar is a time capsule filled with stories just waiting to be uncovered? The journey of the 1985 Lincoln cent from overlooked copper to a six-figure marvel is more than just a collector's tale, it's a reminder that history, value, and wonder often live in the most unexpected places. In 1985, the United States was a nation standing at the crossroads of the past and the future. It was a year that saw the echoes of the Cold War still shaping global politics, while domestically, Americans were adjusting to economic recovery and the cultural vibrancy that defined the mid-80s. MTV was dominating pop culture, personal computers were beginning to infiltrate homes, and the Space Shuttle Challenger was making headlines. Amidst all of this, the U.S. Mint continued its routine task of producing coins, pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters, without much fanfare. Yet, within the seemingly mundane flow of coinage, something remarkable was quietly happening. The 1985 Lincoln 1-cent coin, also known as the penny, is a fascinating case study in how an everyday object can become an object of obsession and immense value. Most Americans at the time probably didn't think twice about the pennies they used to buy candy, newspapers, or payphones. But for numismatists and coin collectors, 1985 was a year that eventually gained extraordinary significance. To truly understand why a single 1985 penny could eventually command a value of $145,000, we must delve deeply into the coin's history, design, production process, and collector interest. The Lincoln cent was first introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of President Abraham Lincoln's birth. It was the first American coin to feature a real person's portrait, marking a significant departure from previous coin designs. Initially, the reverse of the penny featured two wheat ears framing the words, 1 cent. This design, known as the wheat penny, remained in circulation until 1958. In 1959, the reverse design was changed to feature the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., in honor of the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. This design remained in place until 2008. By 1985, the Lincoln Memorial cent had become a staple of American currency. The obverse still bore the familiar image of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner, while the reverse featured Frank Gasparo's detailed rendering of the Lincoln Memorial. However, what most people didn't know was that the composition of the penny had undergone a significant change just a few years earlier. Prior to mid-1982, pennies were made primarily of bronze, a mix of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. However, due to rising copper prices, the U.S. Mint decided to change the composition of the penny to a more cost-effective material. Starting in the latter half of 1982, pennies were instead made of zinc with a thin copper plating, reducing their overall copper content to just 2.5%. This change had several implications, both for the physical properties of the coin and for the minting process itself. The new copper-plated zinc pennies were lighter, more prone to corrosion if the plating was breached, and sometimes more susceptible to striking errors. The transition was smooth on the surface, but it created an environment where mistakes were more likely to occur, especially during a time when the mint was modernizing equipment and transitioning between old and new dies. It was in this environment that several varieties of the 1985 penny were born. One of the most famous varieties is the 1985 penny struck on a foreign planchet. This error occurred when a blank meant for a coin of another denomination or country was mistakenly used to strike a U.S. cent. These planchets could be slightly smaller or lighter than the standard 1-cent blank, creating coins that look and feel different but bear the unmistakable features of the Lincoln design. When authenticated, such coins are considered highly valuable due to their rarity and the improbability of such a mistake occurring. Another noteworthy variant includes the 1985 double die penny. This error occurs during the die-making process when the hub used to create the die imprints its design more than once, but slightly misaligned. This results in a doubling of images or letters on the coin. On 1985 pennies, doubling may be noticeable on the date, the word liberty, or the motto, "In God We Trust." While not as dramatic as the famous 1955 double die cent, the 1985 version is still sought after by collectors for its uniqueness. Off-center strikes are another type of error that appears on 1985 pennies. These coins are misaligned during the minting process, resulting in an incomplete or oddly shaped coin. The value of an off-center strike. Imagine, if you will, a small copper coin, so ordinary in appearance, so easily passed from hand to hand, its dull sheen unassuming, its presence often unnoticed. A penny. Just a penny. The kind you might find at the bottom of a drawer, or lodged between couch cushions, or forgotten at the edge of a parking lot. But what if I told you that one such penny, minted in 1988, could be worth $165,000? Yes, 1 cent, turned into a small fortune. But the value isn't just in the metal. It's in the mystery, the history, and the microscopic details that make this coin something extraordinary. This is the story of a coin that went from pocket change to prized treasure. This is the story of the 1988 Lincoln cent. The tale begins long before 1988. To understand this penny, we need to go back. Back to 1909, when the first Lincoln cent was introduced, honoring the 100th birthday of Abraham Lincoln. It was the first U.S. coin to feature a real person, an act that was, at the time, surprisingly controversial. Before Lincoln, coins bore symbols of liberty, eagles, and allegorical figures. But with Lincoln, came a shift. The penny wasn't just currency, it was a tribute. A piece of history in your palm. The coin saw many changes over the years, from the addition of the Lincoln Memorial in 1959 to honor the sesquicentennial of Lincoln's birth, to material adjustments like the removal of nearly all copper in 1982 due to rising metal costs. That year, pennies shifted from being composed of 95% copper to a primarily zinc core with a thin copper plating. And by 1988, the Lincoln cent had become a stalwart of American change, a common piece of pocket litter that nobody thought twice about. But then came the anomaly. The 1988 Lincoln cent, at first glance, looked just like every other penny in your change jar. It had Lincoln's solemn profile on the obverse, his gaze steady, his form familiar. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial, centered and surrounded by the usual inscriptions, United States of America, E pluribus unum, and 1 cent. A million indistinguishable copies. Billions, even. What could possibly make one of them special? The answer lies in a detail so small, so easy to miss, that most people never give it a second thought. But collectors, they see things differently. They see not just coins, but stories. They see the labor of minting, the mistakes that sneak past even the most careful inspection, and the subtle changes that can turn a common cent into a numismatic legend. In the case of the 1988 penny, the secret lies in the initials, FG, on the reverse, the mark of Frank Gasparo, the coin's designer. On a normal 1988 penny, the FG appears slightly distant from the base of the Lincoln Memorial, clean and crisply defined. But on the rare and highly coveted variant, known among collectors as the 1988 reverse of 1989, those tiny initials appear closer to the building, altered in style, hinting at a different die entirely. What happened? It turns out, the U.S. Mint had made a subtle shift in reverse design from 1988 to 1989, modifying the die that stamped the Lincoln Memorial. But in some cases, a 1989 reverse die was accidentally, or perhaps experimentally, used on 1988 cents. A mix-up. A mint error. And therein lies the magic. These transitional error coins, where the reverse doesn't match the year, are incredibly rare. Most people never notice. Most of these pennies were spent, worn down, lost to time. But a few, just a few, were discovered by sharp-eyed collectors. And that's where things got interesting. At first, the discovery barely made a ripple. A couple of numismatists spotted the design anomaly and began documenting the reverse differences. Forums buzzed with theories. Was it a mistake? A test strike? A quiet experiment? Over time, more examples surfaced. Still very few, fewer than a couple dozen confirmed high-grade examples. But enough to cement the coin's place in numismatic lore. Grading became paramount. Every tiny scratch, every minute ding, was magnified and scrutinized. A coin graded MS, mint state, 65 or higher was considered a gem. An MS 67? Practically a miracle. And that's what made this coin truly explosive in value. In auctions, a verified 1988 Lincoln cent with the reverse of 1989 in pristine condition, especially one graded by PCGS or NGC, fetched eye-watering prices. The record? $165,000. For a penny. Just imagine, someone, somewhere, might have tossed that coin into a tip jar, used it to buy gum, or let it fall between the cracks of a car seat, never knowing that what they held was a treasure. But value, as any collector will tell you, is about more than rarity. It's about story. This penny's story captures the essence of why people collect, why they scour yard sales, sort through change, and keep magnifying glasses at the ready. It's about discovery. About a seemingly insignificant detail that turns the ordinary into the extraordinary. It's about a coin that should never have existed, yet somehow, did, and the market responded with fascination. Videos were made, articles were published, and collectors began checking every 1988 penny they came across. Many tried. Most failed. But the dream, that one day, you might find a fortune in your pocket change, persisted. The 1988 reverse of 1989 penny became a symbol of hidden value, of mystery hiding in plain sight. It sparked a renaissance in coin collecting among a younger generation, captivated by the idea that something so small could be so valuable. And then there's the deeper layer. The question of intent. Was the use of the 1989 reverse on 1988 cents truly an accident? Or was it, perhaps, intentional, a quiet test, or a limited trial run? We may never know. The U.S. Mint has made no definitive statement on the matter, and internal documentation from that era is limited. Some experts believe the die was simply prepared early and mistakenly used. Others think it might have been part of a transition experiment, perhaps a way to phase in the new design before the official changeover. Whatever the truth, it adds to the coin's mystique. Today, if you're lucky enough to hold a 1988 penny in your hand, take a moment. Tilt it under the light. Look for the FG initials. Study the distance, the angle, the spacing. Because hidden among the billions of ordinary cents, there may be a treasure. One coin, worth just 1 cent to the untrained eye, but potentially life-changing for the right collector. And that, truly, is the magic of numismatics. So the next time you walk past a penny on the ground, don't pick it up. Look closely. Because the difference between a penny and a payday could be microscopic. The journey of the 1988 penny doesn't end with its rare design anomaly. In fact, what's just as compelling is what happens next, the search. Imagine this: coin collectors around the country, from hobbyists sorting through coffee cans full of coins to professionals hunched over microscopes, were suddenly united by a common goal. They were all hunting the same phantom coin. And with every 1988 penny that passed through their hands, the anticipation grew. Was this the one? There's a certain romance to that kind of search. The low stakes of everyday life mixed with the potential for a high reward, it's intoxicating. Some liken it to panning for gold, others to searching for a winning lottery ticket. But this pursuit had something different. Something tactile. You could feel the weight of the coin in your hand. You could examine it with your own eyes. And if you were lucky, if you spotted that small but critical variation in design, your heart might skip a beat. Collectors began posting side-by-side comparison photos online, showing the subtle difference in the FG initials. They pointed out the sharper details in the memorial base. They drew arrows, circled anomalies, and published guides. Forums buzzed with excitement. And of course, forgeries emerged too. Scammers filed at the edges, altered initials, even tried to replicate wear patterns. But true numismatists, they knew better. The difference was not something that could be convincingly faked. It was baked into the strike itself, into the die that formed the coin. If you had the real thing, it was obvious under proper magnification and in the right hands. Meanwhile, stories began to circulate, urban legends of sorts. A kid who found one in a soda machine change tray. A retiree who stumbled upon one while rolling coins from an old jar. A gas station clerk who collected odd pennies just for fun and struck gold. Most were just stories. But a few were verifiable. Real coins, authenticated and graded, sold at auction for thousands, and in some cases, tens of thousands. Then came that one extraordinary sale, a near-perfect example graded MS67RD, with stunning luster and almost no imperfections, hammered at auction for $165,000. That was the moment the legend was sealed. It's ironic, in a way. The penny is perhaps the least respected of all American coins. People toss it aside, grumble when they get too many in change, some even advocate for its elimination entirely. Yet here it was, making headlines. Making dreams come true. That's the paradox of collecting: the least can become the most, the forgotten can become famous, and something as insignificant as a tiny design shift can rewrite the value of a thing entirely. To understand why this coin means so much to collectors, you have to understand what numismatics is really about. It's not just about value, not really. It's about connection. To history. To craft. To the invisible threads that tie one era to the next. Every coin tells a story. Of the mint worker who set the die. Of the designer who carved the original mold. Of the millions of fingers that handled it before you ever saw it. Of the journey it took to get to your pocket. And when a coin breaks the mold, literally, it becomes more than currency. It becomes a relic.